In the world where the past never stays buried, Ethan finds himself on the verge of a revelation that could shatter everything he thought he knew about himself. A chance encounter with two twin girls sets off a chain of events that will turn his life upside down. There's something hidden within his own family, and the truth, when it finally comes to light, will change everything. The question is he ready to face it? If you're curious to find out what happens to Ethan, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Let's explore this journey of mysteries, betrayals, and secrets together. Ethan never imagined that a simple encounter at a cafe would change the course of his life. He was in one of the most peaceful moments of his routine, far from the dilemmas and responsibilities of his career as a businessman. His mind was preoccupied with everyday tasks when those two twin girls appeared. At first, it was just a curious glance, a shy smile, but the feeling of déjà vu was instant. There was something about them that stirred him in an inexplicable way. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when Ethan sat at the table by the cafe window. He was trying to distract himself from the pressures of work, relaxing with a hot cup of coffee. The girls were sitting at the table next to him, quietly talking while scribbling something in their notebooks. Ethan couldn't quite explain why, but he couldn't take his eyes off them. Maybe it was the way they moved with a unique grace, or perhaps it was the fact that for the first time in a long while, something seemed to stir his heart in a deep way. The first thing that hit him was their resemblance to someone he could barely remember. It was almost as if these girls were an echo from the past, but he couldn't put his finger on why. He shook off the thought, focusing again on the newspaper he was reading, but the feeling wouldn't pass. It was like the girls had something to do with him, though he didn't know how. When the twins got up to leave, one of them looked directly at him. Her gaze, filled with silent intensity, made Ethan's chest tighten. There was something there he couldn't ignore. The older girl, with dark brown hair and a birthmark on her neck, gave a faint smile and left, leaving behind an unsettling feeling that wouldn't go away. Ethan's mind raced, trying to rationalize it. It had to be a coincidence. There was no way those girls were connected to him, right? But the feeling lingered. He spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, unable to shake the strange sense of familiarity. As he left the cafe, he caught a glimpse of the girls again. They were getting into a car with an elderly couple, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan wondered about the family dynamics. Who were they? What was the connection between those girls and him? The question gnawed at him. He told himself it was nothing, just a bizarre encounter. Yet, as the days passed, the sensation only grew stronger. Something in the pit of his stomach told him that he needed to understand more. Something was pulling him toward the twins, and he couldn't ignore it. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan started his investigation. He had no idea where it would lead, but the curiosity was too overwhelming. Was it just a strange coincidence? Or was there something deeper at play, something connected to his own past? As he dug deeper, Ethan uncovered a startling truth. The girl's mother had passed away during childbirth, leaving them in the care of their maternal grandparents. That alone wasn't enough to link them to Ethan, but then, as he delved further into their family history, he found something even more unsettling. Victor, his uncle, had actively blocked any attempts the girl's mother had made to contact him during her pregnancy. Letters, messages, and phone calls had all been intercepted, leaving Ethan confused and disturbed. Why had his uncle done this? What was he hiding? The more Ethan uncovered, the more his mind raced. Could the mother of the twins have been someone from his past? As he pieced together the clues, one thing became painfully clear. The birthmark on one of the girls had significance. It had always been there, a small mark on her neck that seemed strangely familiar. He couldn't place it, but it was as if it was the key to unlocking a truth he'd been denied for years. The weight of guilt began to settle heavily on his chest. He discovered that, even before her death, the girl's mother had tried, unsuccessfully, to contact him to reveal the truth. It was clear now. Those girls were his daughters. His heart sank as he realized that he had been kept in the dark, manipulated by the very people he trusted the most. The truth was there, staring him in the face. The gaping hole in his life, the mystery that had always lingered, was finally being filled, but with it came an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Ethan had never imagined being a father, and yet here he was, faced with the reality that he had 2 daughters, and he had missed out on so much. As the days passed, Ethan wrestled with the enormity of what he had uncovered. There were so many unanswered questions, so much pain to process. The weight of the past, the lies, and the betrayal hung over him like a dark cloud. The girls had been living with the knowledge that their mother had passed away, but now they had to face the truth that their father, someone who could have been there, had never known they existed. With each passing hour, the guilt gnawed at him more and more. He hadn't been there for them when they needed him the most, and now he didn't know how to fix it. It was a truth too painful to accept, but there was no turning back now. Ethan was going to have to confront his past, face his family's betrayal, and somehow try to make things right with the daughters he never knew he had. And as he prepared for the confrontation with his uncle Victor, Ethan knew one thing for sure: the truth was only the beginning. The road ahead would be far more difficult than he could have ever imagined. The discovery of the twins' true identity had set off a storm inside Ethan. The guilt and confusion overwhelmed him as he tried to piece together a past that had been deliberately hidden from him. How had he not known? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Not just with his uncle Victor, but with himself. He should have noticed the signs, seen the clues, yet he had been blind to it all. Determined to confront the truth head-on, Ethan hired a private investigator, someone with a reputation for digging into the darkest corners of family secrets. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Jane, got to work immediately. Her cold professionalism clashed with Ethan's raw, emotional turmoil. But he didn't care. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Days passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and late nights spent looking through old family documents. It was Jane who first uncovered the most damning piece of information. Not only had Victor interfered with the girl's mother's attempts to contact Ethan, but there was something even more troubling. Ethan's mother, Victor's sister, had been very close to the twins' mother before her death. They had shared a bond, a deep friendship, and it was this friendship that had driven Victor to go to such extreme lengths to keep Ethan in the dark. Jane's findings led Ethan down a path he hadn't expected. He hadn't thought of his mother's relationship with the twins' mother in years, but now it all seemed to make sense. It was Victor who had silenced the mother of his children, preventing her from reaching out, from telling him the truth. But why? Why go to such lengths to conceal the fact that Ethan was a father? The answer, it turned out, was rooted in power. Victor had always been obsessed with control. He was the one who managed the family business, who made the decisions, and who dictated the flow of money. The idea that Ethan might become a father was a threat to him. If Ethan had children, especially daughters, the family's wealth and legacy could be legally altered, the inheritance could be reshaped, and Victor's hold over the empire could be loosened. Ethan wasn't just a nephew to him, he was a rival. The discovery shook Ethan to his core. He had never thought of Victor as anything but a stern but loving uncle. Now he saw the depths of Victor's manipulations, the way he had used his influence to reshape their family's future and Ethan's own life. The more Ethan thought about it, the more the reality of his situation sunk in. He had been denied the right to know he was a father. He had missed the entire infancy of his daughters, their first steps, their first words. The guilt, raw and sharp, threatened to suffocate him. In the days that followed, Ethan visited the twins. He had already made up his mind that he would approach them, that he would do whatever it took to be in their lives. But how would he even begin to explain this? How could he ask for their forgiveness when, for all intents and purposes, he had been an invisible man in their lives? The first meeting was more difficult than he could have imagined. The twins, now around 8 years old, had a wariness about them that Ethan couldn't ignore. They knew him as a distant figure, someone who had never been a part of their lives. And now, Suddenly, he was there, claiming to be their father. They were polite but distant, their eyes studying him with a mix of confusion and suspicion. The older twin, Clara, was the first to speak. She asked, her voice soft but firm, "Why didn't you ever come for us?" Ethan's chest tightened, the words sticking in his throat. How could he explain years of deception? How could he make them understand that he hadn't known they existed until it was too late? "I didn't know," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I swear to you, I didn't know. Your mother tried to contact me. She wanted me to be a part of your lives. But someone kept us apart. I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you." Clara frowned, her eyes narrowing. "You should have known. You should have tried harder. We needed you." The words cut through him like a knife. The guilt, the shame, the overwhelming sense of responsibility came crashing down on him in a wave. He had failed them, not just as a father, but as a human being who had allowed years of lies to stand between him and his daughters. The younger twin, Emma, said nothing. She merely clung to her sister's side, her small hand gripping Clara's tightly. Ethan could see the fear in their eyes, the fear of betrayal, the fear of more loss. The silence in the room was suffocating. Ethan could feel the tension, the distance, and the emotional wall that the girls had built around themselves. He knew he couldn't tear it down in a single conversation, but he also knew he couldn't give up on them. Not now, not ever. "Please," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I want to be a part of your lives. I can't undo the past, but I'll spend every day trying to make it right. I'll be the father you deserve." Clara didn't respond. Instead, she just turned her head away, her shoulders stiff with rejection. Emma, too, stayed silent, her gaze lowered to the floor. It was clear that the road ahead would be long and painful. Ethan wasn't sure how to reach them, how to bridge the gap that years of absence had created. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to stop trying. He couldn't. But as he left their house that evening, the weight of their silence followed him. He had no idea how to rebuild what had been broken, but he knew he couldn't give up. For them, for him, for the chance to finally be the father he had always hoped he could be. But as he stepped into his car and drove away, the nagging feeling remained. There was more to this story, more that Victor had kept from him, more that he still didn't know, and Ethan couldn't shake the sense that the deeper he dug, the more dangerous the truth would become. Ethan's mind raced with 1,000 questions, each one more troubling than the last. The weight of the guilt from missing out on his daughters' lives sat heavily on his chest. But there was something else, a deeper, more pressing issue that he couldn't ignore. The truth was out there, and it was buried beneath years of deceit. His confrontation with Victor was inevitable. He had to face the man who had kept him from his own flesh and blood. The meeting took place in the grand office of the family estate, a place where Ethan had grown up, where memories of a different life lingered before everything had become tainted by secrets and lies. The room, with its rich wood paneling and expensive furnishings, had once felt like a place of safety, but now it felt like a battlefield. Victor was seated behind his desk, his sharp eyes watching Ethan carefully as he walked in. The years had not been kind to his uncle, but there was still an air of authority about him. He hadn't changed. His posture was as rigid as ever, and his face betrayed nothing. But Ethan saw it, the flicker of something in Victor's eyes when they met. It was the smallest of shifts, but it was there. "Ethan," Victor said, his voice smooth, but there was a tension there that Ethan could feel. "What brings you here?" The words felt like a slap in the face. After everything, Victor still had the nerve to act as if nothing was wrong. Ethan took a deep breath, his fists clenching at his sides. He couldn't let Victor get away with this any longer. "You know why I'm here," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "I know the truth about the girls, about my daughters." Victor's face remained impassive, but Ethan could see a flicker of something darker in his eyes now. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, and for a moment neither man spoke. The silence between them was thick, charged with years of betrayal and lies. "Ethan," Victor finally said, his tone cool, "you're wrong. You've misunderstood everything." "No, Victor!" Ethan snapped, his voice rising with the weight of everything he had uncovered. "I've spent months looking into this. You stopped her from reaching out to me. You kept me from knowing my daughters. You—" Victor interrupted, his voice rising with more authority than Ethan had ever heard from him. "I did what I had to do to protect this family, Ethan. You would have destroyed everything. You don't understand. It wasn't just about you or her. It was about the future, the business, the legacy. I couldn't let a child change everything." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. The cold reality of what Victor had done to him, to his daughters, to their entire family, became crystal clear. Victor hadn't just protected the family empire from the possibility of losing power, he had protected himself. And now, the depth of his manipulation was all too clear. "You really think that keeping me from them was for the family's good?" Ethan's voice trembled with rage. "For my good. You've ruined everything." "Victor, I should have been there for them. I should have been there for their mother." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what it's like to be in control, Ethan. You never understood what it takes to run everything, to keep everything together. If I had let you know about those girls, the family business would have fallen apart. It would have been chaos, and you wouldn't have been ready for it. You weren't ready to be a father." The words stung, but they weren't as sharp as the realization that everything Victor had done was motivated by his own selfish need for power. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his pulse quickening with the fight-or-flight response. This wasn't just about a father trying to be in his daughters' lives anymore. This was about a corrupt system that had kept him from everything he was supposed to have. "I don't care about the business anymore," Ethan said through clenched teeth. "I care about my daughters. I care about them. Victor, you've taken years from me, from them, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Victor stood up from his chair, his face red with anger. "You think you can just waltz in here and claim your spot as their father? You think you can fix everything with a few sweet words? It's too late for that. Ethan, you can't just undo what's been done." Ethan's voice softened, but the anger still simmered beneath the surface. "I don't need to undo anything. I just need to be there for them now. I've missed too much already, but I'll make up for it. I won't stop until they know I'm their father." Victor's lips twisted into a sneer. "You'll fail. They'll never accept you, and you'll destroy yourself in the process." Ethan held his ground. "Maybe I'll fail. Maybe it will be hard, but I'm not backing down, and you won't stop me. Not anymore." The two men stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Ethan could feel the weight of everything Victor had taken from him, the years, the lies, the manipulation. But for the first time in his life, Ethan realized something crucial. Victor's hold over him, over the family, was finally slipping. The truth had a way of changing things, of breaking down walls that had once seemed impenetrable, and Ethan was willing to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. As he walked out of the room, leaving Victor behind, a sense of determination washed over him. There was still so much to do. The road to rebuilding his relationship with his daughters would be long, and the scars of betrayal ran deep. But Ethan knew one thing for sure: he would never give up on them. The next few days were a blur. Ethan went to the girls again, desperate to make them understand. They were still distant, still wary, but this time there was something different. There was a flicker of something in their eyes when they saw him, a quiet hope buried beneath the layers of hurt. Ethan was ready to do whatever it took to make them see that he wasn't going anywhere. But he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something even darker was lurking beneath the surface. Something about the past that had yet to be uncovered. Something about Victor's involvement that was still unclear. As he sat with the twins, trying to explain himself, a chill ran down his spine. There was more to this story, more to the lies, and he had a feeling that the deeper he dug, the more dangerous the truth would become. The battle lines had been drawn. Ethan knew that confronting his uncle had been only the first step in a long, treacherous journey toward reclaiming his place in his daughters' lives. But every step he took forward only seemed to dig him deeper into a pit of emotional turmoil. The guilt over the years he'd lost weighed heavily on him, and the distance between him and his daughters felt impossible to bridge. Clara and Emma were still distant, their trust in him fragile at best. They had been abandoned for so long, and the scars ran deep. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's efforts to connect with the girls seemed futile. They were polite, but closed off. Clara, the older twin, was the most vocal in her resistance. Every time Ethan tried to open up to show them that he cared, she withdrew further. Emma, on the other hand, was quieter. She would occasionally glance at him as though searching for something, but it was clear she wasn't ready to accept him into her life. The guilt churned in his stomach. He had so many words to say, so many things he wanted to explain, but every time he tried, they shut him down. He could see the pain in their eyes, the pain of loss, of betrayal, of a life that had been turned upside down without their consent. They weren't just grieving their mother's death. They were grieving the fact that they had been abandoned by the man who should have been there for them. It was Claire, their teacher, who finally helped him see the way forward. After a particularly difficult meeting with the girls, Claire asked to speak with him privately. She had become an unexpected ally, offering support when Ethan needed it the most. She was more than just a teacher to the girls. She was their protector, their safe harbor. Claire had witnessed firsthand the impact of their mother's absence and Ethan's sudden appearance, but she also saw the possibility of healing, if only Ethan could figure out how to reach them. "You're approaching this all wrong," Claire said one afternoon, her voice calm but firm. "You're trying to fix everything all at once, but they're not ready for that. They've been hurt too much, Ethan. You need to show them that you're not just here to take over their lives, that you're here to listen." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling over. "I've been trying. Claire, I've been trying everything. They won't let me in. They won't even talk to me." Claire studied him for a moment before speaking again. "They don't know how to trust you. You've been a stranger to them for their entire lives. It's going to take time, but if you really want to get through to them, you need to show them that you're not just their father by blood, but by action." It hit Ethan like a wave. She was right. He hadn't been a father to them, not really. He had spent years focused on his career, on the family business, on everything but the people who truly mattered. And now, with everything hanging in the balance, he expected them to welcome him into their lives as if nothing had happened. But that wasn't how it worked. They needed to see that he could be there for them, that he could be the father they deserved. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a spark of hope. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But he wasn't going to give up on them, no matter how hard it got. With Claire's guidance, Ethan began to change his approach. Instead of trying to force a relationship, he started showing up, not as a father trying to reclaim what he had lost, but as a man who was willing to earn their trust piece by piece. He began to spend more time with them in small, quiet moments, helping them with homework, taking them to the park, simply being present without expecting anything in return. He started to understand that they needed to heal before they could accept him as their father, and that healing would take time. But no matter how much effort he put in, the shadow of his Uncle Victor loomed large over everything. Ethan couldn't ignore the fact that the entire family structure was crumbling. The business was faltering, his own place in the family was uncertain, and Victor's grip on the estate was tightening. His uncle hadn't taken kindly to Ethan's attempts to reconnect with the girls, and the tension between them was escalating. One evening, as Ethan and the twins were sitting down to dinner, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from his lawyer. The battle for custody of the girls had officially begun. Victor had filed to retain control over them, using his influence and wealth to push for the girls to stay with their grandparents. It was a move designed to keep the status quo intact, to maintain his monopoly on the family empire. Ethan's blood ran cold as he read the message. He knew what this meant. The battle for the girls' future had just become a full-fledged war. The next day, the lawyers met. The tension in the air was thick with unresolved grievances, past betrayals, and mounting pressure. Victor didn't even try to hide the malice in his eyes as he faced Ethan across the table. The older man's voice was cold, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. "You'll never win this, Ethan," Victor said, leaning back in his chair with a smug smile. "You have no chance. The girls belong with their grandparents. That's where they're safest. You don't have the life experience, the stability they need. You're too late. Ethan's fists clenched beneath the table, but he refused to show Victor the satisfaction of seeing him react. Instead, he focused on the future, on the girls. He had to win. For them. He had no choice now. The legal battle was just beginning. But Ethan wasn't backing down. Not after everything he had uncovered. Not after everything he had learned about the lies and manipulation. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was suffocating. But Ethan was ready to fight. He had to fight for his daughters, for their future, and for the chance to finally build the family he had always dreamed of. But the closer he got to the truth, the more he realized that there were things even darker than he had imagined, things that would tear the family apart in ways he couldn't foresee. As Ethan left the lawyer's office that day, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The game had changed, and the path ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear. He would do whatever it took to keep his daughters with him, even if it meant losing everything else. The tension in the air had never been so thick. Ethan had braced himself for the storm that was Victor, but nothing could prepare him for the full force of the battle ahead. The stakes had risen beyond personal guilt and emotional distance. The fight for his daughter's custody had become a fierce and public war, and Ethan was standing in the middle of it, facing not just his uncle, but an entire family legacy that had always been built on control, secrecy, and manipulation. As the court hearings continued, every moment felt like a battlefield. Every legal meeting, every exchange between his lawyer and Victor's, every moment in the courtroom was a painful reminder of how much he had lost and how much he was still at risk of losing. The emotional toll was overwhelming, but Ethan couldn't stop now. He had come too far, and he couldn't let Victor win. Not after everything, not after the truth had come out. The girls, still hesitant to trust him, had become increasingly withdrawn as the custody battle intensified. They could sense the shift in the atmosphere, how their world had been turned upside down. Clara and Emma, though still uncertain of their place in Ethan's life, had grown quiet, unsure of who to turn to or what to believe. Their love for their mother was still fresh in their hearts. And now, the father they had never known was suddenly at the center of their lives, causing even more confusion and pain. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal court session, Ethan found himself standing in front of the girls' house, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. He had hoped they might be at ease by now, but it was clear from their expressions when they saw him that they hadn't come to terms with any of this. Clara was the first to speak. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, the walls she had built around herself only growing higher. "What do you want?" Her voice was tight, defensive. Ethan hesitated. He knew he had to be careful with his words. The last thing he wanted was to drive them further away. I want to be here for you. I'm not going to stop trying." "You've already lost," Clara said bitterly, her words like a knife. "You don't get to just show up and act like everything's fine. We don't need you." The rejection stung, but it wasn't new. He had expected this. He couldn't blame her for being angry, for not understanding. It was what he deserved, for all the years of absence, all the time he had let slip away. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Ethan said softly, his voice cracking, "but I'm not asking for it right now. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be here for you, that I can be the father you've never had." Emma, who had been standing quietly by Clara's side, finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why now? Why didn't you care before?" The question hung in the air like an unspoken weight, and Ethan knew there was no easy answer. His heart ached as he tried to find the right words, but they felt insufficient in the face of everything they had gone through. "I didn't know about you," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know you existed, and that's the hardest part of all of this. I failed you before you even had the chance to know me, but I swear to you, I will never give up on you." Clara shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "You don't get to come in and fix everything. You can't just walk into our lives and expect us to forgive you." Ethan's heart shattered. He wasn't looking for forgiveness, not yet. He only wanted a chance to make things right, a chance to be there for them. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me right now," Ethan said, his voice full of raw honesty. "But I need you to know that I'm here, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust, even if it takes years." The silence between them was heavy, suffocating. Ethan watched as Clara and Emma exchanged a quiet glance. A flicker of something, perhaps doubt, perhaps a hint of hope, passing between them. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he wasn't completely alone in this fight. It was then that he realized what he had to do. The business, the money, the power, none of that mattered anymore. What mattered now was the future he could build with his daughters. Even if that future was uncertain, he had to make peace with the fact that it wouldn't be easy, that there would be days of rejection, of painful silence, and of uncertainty. But he couldn't let Victor win, not in the courtrooms, not in their lives. Ethan made a decision that day, one that would forever change the course of his life. He walked into the lawyer's office the next morning and made an unexpected move. He renounced his claim to the family fortune. He walked away from the empire, the business, and all the wealth that had always defined him. He could no longer live for power, for the legacy of his name. What he needed now, what he had been searching for all this time, was something more precious than any fortune. "I don't want the money," he told his lawyer, his voice steady. "I want to build a future for my daughters. I want to do something that matters, something that isn't about legacy or inheritance. I want to help others, make up for what I've done. It's time to focus on what really matters." And so he did. Ethan used his wealth, his influence, to start a foundation dedicated to helping single parents and children who had lost one of their parents, a cause that honored the memory of the girl's mother, whom he had never known, but whose legacy he could now respect. It was his way of attempting to repair the wounds of the past and give his daughters the kind of future they deserved. The journey wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and days when the walls between him and his daughters seemed insurmountable. But through it all, he never gave up. He worked every day to show them that he was there for them, not just because he was their father, but because he loved them, even if they didn't know how to love him back yet. In time, the walls began to crumble. Slowly, Clara and Emma began to open up. They still had scars, still carried the weight of abandonment, but they saw, in Ethan's dedication and love, something they hadn't expected, a real father who would never leave again. One day, after months of hard work and quiet persistence, Ethan took Clara and Emma to the cemetery where their mother was buried. The three of them stood together, silent, as they placed flowers on her grave. And in that moment, amidst the grief and the quiet sadness, Ethan finally felt a sense of peace. The journey had been long. It had been filled with pain, betrayal, and heartache, but it had also been filled with healing, with second chances, and with the undeniable truth that sometimes it takes losing everything to finally understand what truly matters. Ethan had found his way back to his daughters, and in doing so had found a new purpose in life, a purpose that was far more important than any family fortune. Together, they began to rebuild their lives, honoring the memory of a mother they all loved and embracing the second chances that life had given them. And as they walked away from the cemetery, hand in hand, Ethan knew that, for the first time in his life, he was finally home.